In this video, we're going to explore the concept of protection. Now, the word protection is most commonly used in spiritual circles to ask for protection. It's commonly used in ayahuasca or other psychedelic expeditions to ask for the positive forces that mean me well to protect me in some way from those thoughts, those feelings, those energies that mean me ill, that wish me to suffer in some way. And I thought I would explore what protection is, what it is that we're protecting. Now, this begins with examining the most valuable aspect of being a human being. Now, in a materialist cult, this would be obvious. Your money would perhaps be the most valuable part in certainly a capitalist cult. It's not a humanist cult, right? It's not a peopleist cult. It's a capitalist cult. And so capital is at the highest point on the pyramid. And certainly if you look at the lists that matter in America, the Forbes 400 list of the wealthiest people in the world is one of the more important lists because there's no list for the kindest people on the planet. There's no list for the best parents. There's no list for the teachers that inspire the most love and gratitude from their students. There's no list of the people who plant the most trees. There's no list for most of the most important aspects of human life, but there is a list for the wealthiest people on the planet. And because of the principle of measure what matters, the people who get on the list, and finally they're listed for something, right? They want to keep climbing up the list. So, you would think you would hang on to money at all costs. But this is not actually the most important asset of a human being. The most important asset or value of a human being is one's state, particularly the human state. Now, within the brain of every human being, there are a number of different operating systems. And they stack on top of one another because we're not just coming in, starting from scratch with each new child. We're actually recreating, in many ways, the entire history of reality, of the universe, out of an initial seed. It's called the Big Bang. Then we divide and expand, and we start specializing. And as we specialize and specialize, slowly the human field, or the human form, takes shape within the human field, the human code of organizing energy. And just as human beings were, spent millions of years evolutionarily in the oceans, in the waters, and then slowly emerge. Well, we start the birth process in the womb, in the waters of the Great Mother, and then come out into dry land and have a whole new birthing process as the creatures of the waters crawled out of the land. And just as they crawled out of the land, an infant moves through its infancy on all fours and experimenting. Then at some point it stands upright. And then at some point we develop language and the ability with language to think to be conscious, because one cannot be conscious of one's consciousness without language. And so consciousness of consciousness emerges through language, and there begins to be self-awareness. And so we've just, in a matter of maybe 25 years, recreated the entire fractal pattern of evolution until this point. Now, the bottom stack is the reptilian stack. It's the sociopathic brain of survival through fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. It's the reptilian brain. Now, above the reptilian brain, we have the rational brain. This is the brain through language that reflects on itself, that observes and analyzes patterns. So the fight, flight, freeze brain is instinctual and sociopathic, run from what is bigger than you and hide, attack what is smaller than you and feed, and paralyze when neither of those options are available. The rational sociopath, the one that can hunt, that can analyze patterns, is the next evolutionary stage, the rational sociopath, to be able to figure out what's likely to happen based on past events and predict the future based on pattern analysis, and be a more effective sociopath in fight, flight, and freeze. Now, the reptilian brain is fear-based, and all fear is fear of pain. And the pain of identity is the pain of losing that identity. Every identity, every cohesive pattern of energy, at some level, tries to exist, tries to sustain its pattern of identity. And so, that I'm me and I want to keep being me. I want to survive as my pattern. And this is a wonderful game that life is playing, because particularly once we move into to animals, the behavior is such to protect the identity. For the most part, if you make to harm something, it runs away. Not because it's embracing death and existentialism, it's running away because it wants to retain its pattern. And if it doesn't run away, and a big object is coming towards it, it may lose that pattern of identity, that pattern of thinking, feeling, speaking, doing, and being, that pattern of existence. And so the rational brain allows us to look into the probable future by analyzing patterns, but we're still a reptile. You see, there's no empathy, there's no love within the paradigm of the reptile, within the sociopathic edict of run from what is bigger than you, chase and consume what is smaller than you, and freeze, avoid, paralyze when neither of those options are available. But what life is breeding for, what life is generating with this attachment to form, is competition. To see, if the giraffe can outrun the tiger, then the giraffe pattern grows. And if the tiger can outrun the giraffe, then the tiger pattern grows. You see, and life is the ultimate winner because it's got a bet in every single player. Every single player at the table is life. And so life is competing with itself to discover. It's basically saying, let's create every pattern imaginable. Let's give it all a shot. Now, every one of you patterns, here's the game. You try and keep living. You try and hold on to your pattern. Now, the bigger patterns, they're going to try and take your pattern, but your job is to run away, to hide, to outmaneuver the bigger patterns. That's the game. And whoever wins this round gets to play another round to see who engages, with the next thing. So this is the game in business. This is the game. This is the game in love. This is, we should be more accurate here. This is the game in sex. From a sociopathic perspective, it's about conquest and winning, as a reptile, as a crocodile, as many animals. If you watch them, it's not about empathy and concern for the other person's feelings. It's about strategy, and it's about conquest. Now, we move then into the empathic brain. Now, this is the antithesis of the reptilian brain. The reptilian brain of the sociopath is fight, flight, freeze, and fawn, or ASLIC, in order to survive and increase the security of survival, in order to amass reserves. And that's the program of the reptile. And the analytical brain is in service. The pattern analyzing brain helps all of the brains predict the future. That's the benefit. It takes energy to analyze something. That train is there, now it's there, now it's there. It took 2 seconds to go from here to here. Based on another 2 seconds, it's going to be here. Yeah, it's a pretty heavy train. Nothing's going to stop it. And I can say with 99.9% certainty that in another 2 seconds, at the current speed, and it can't stop even if it wants to. It's got, 300,000 tons that it's going, and it's going at the velocity. It can't stop. Okay, so in another 2 seconds, it's going to be there. Now that I know what's going to happen 2 seconds from now, I can depend on reality to deliver that. Now, as a sociopath, I now know the train is going to hit this point at 2 seconds. So if I can get my adversary to collide with that space 2 seconds from now, then my adversary is knocked over by a bigger enemy, meaning I've led my enemy into a trap, where now the enemy is not fighting me, they're fighting a 200-ton train. And the law of mass, which is the primary law of the reptile, says that the larger pattern of energy always wins in a collision of force. And so if I can just get my opponent to collide with that bigger force, then my opponent will be knocked aside. And then when they're disoriented, I can prey on them in some way. So this is the thinking of a sociopath, to consume energy from any pattern around it that it can outwit, that it can be bigger than. And this is the great joy of the sociopath. I made the kill. I outwitted the thing. The other guy is out of business, and now I've got all his customers, right? So this is the great pinnacle of sociopathic thinking. And when millions and millions of sociopaths are all trying to outwit one another, etc., it's rather depressing on an empathic level, but on an energy efficiency level, what life is doing is seeing who comes out the winner, which is the most efficient pattern over time, because life enjoys winning. And it's all life, so you could say life is competing with life to see which part of itself emerges as the winner. Now, that's not how the ego, crocodiles don't have egos, but the human ego, of course, doesn't see that it's a part of life. The human ego, sees itself as distinct and is trying to, in many ways, conquer life, to outwit life. But nevertheless, from the perspective of life, what we're doing is we're doing billions of experiments to breed for competency, for efficiency, and for various forms of intelligence. And the fastest and the smartest and the most intuitive and all of those things are going to lift to the top and are going to reproduce at higher states of intelligence than if this whole game had not been played out. And so it's life's game of figuring out how to win more efficiently than before. And so this is a stage of evolution. Now, it's not a very fuzzy stage if you're a human animal, busily all the tribes trying to steal your women and do this. It's not a very fun game. It's a game riddled with fear and with pain because it's a zero-sum game. It's a zero-sum game where if I win, you lose, and if you lose, I win. Now, life is playing a win-win game because life is all of it, right? And so if I lose and someone else wins, life is in that person. Life is the winner. And life is the winner learning. And all of the witnesses of life that have observed the losing dynamic, they all observe and say, that pattern worked better than this pattern. We'll do more of that pattern next time. And life wins some more, and some more, and some more, and some more. So life is always winning. And if we identify with life, then we're all winning too, because we get to say, oh, the winner did this, next life, next lifetime, we'll try that one and do this. But if we're identifying with the fragility of the isolated self, the ego, then we're losing almost all the time because, nobody listens to what we want to do, right? And even if, okay, fine, you listen to what I have to say, but nobody else does, right? And so I'm always losing, right? The ego is always losing, even when it's winning, because, there's always someone better, it's, I was the richest person in the world, and now so-and-so is, right? It's terrible. So the ego is always in this kind of dynamic or surrounded by this vast thing called life that it doesn't understand that it's an innate part of. But life is always winning. And it's not very fun to be a sociopathic human animal because you're not a human being until you enter the human brain. So far, we're dealing with the crocodile brain, the reptilian brain. We're dealing with the rational brain. We're still an animal. We're now a rational sociopath. The most dangerous person on the planet, or the most dangerous pattern of energy on the planet, is the highly skilled sociopath who is in an operating system where they are at war with existence, with everything. For the sociopathic brain, the world is bigger than them, and so the world is the enemy. And so they're trying to outwit life, and life's always trying to kill them. And in that self-absorbed state of at war with all people and all things all of the time, in that pattern of war, a sociopath can do anything and cause enormous harms to get a little bit of edge. A sociopath will take someone's wallet and they lost their job. Their kids died because they couldn't pay the hospital bill. They had to spend months getting new IDs so that the sociopath could get $50. And the sociopath thinks this is a terrific, an intelligent thing to do. They got $50 and, an entire month deteriorates for an entire family over the loss of IDs and wallets and appointments and all that. And so, but the sociopath doesn't care because it's dissociated from its fellow members of the species. It's not a human. A sociopath is not a human. It is a highly competent reptile. And so, it's dangerous when you're dealing with a highly trained, completely immune to pain sociopath. But it's important to understand that being a sociopath is not very fun. Why? You cannot trust anyone, and trust is fun. When you can trust people around you, it's more fun than when you distrust everyone around you. You cannot love yourself or anyone else because a reptile, the reptilian brain and the analytical brain, cannot love. To love is to become one with, to empathize with, to attune with, to move in step with, for the purpose of giving and receiving joy and pleasure. You cannot love as a sociopath, as a reptile, as a rational robot. You cannot love, and love is the most enjoyable. Not the skewed definitions of bullshit that were given, but love itself is the most enjoyable state. It's the most fun state. Now, the sociopathic reptile has fun taking revenge. It's a very thin fun. It's not the expansiveness, the joyful fun of a human being, of the empathic brain. It's not the joy and depth and savored dimension of love, self-love or other. It's thin. I got one over on them, right? And so, so by all means, if you are a reptile, if you are in a sociopathic state, enjoy the fun of winning. That's what the state is for, to propel competency to the next level. And you do that through competition and winning. It's just a very thin dynamic. Now, similarly, you cannot partner fully. You cannot let your guard down. So you have to consume energy in defense and prepared offense when you are in the reptilian brain. Because your belief framework as a reptile is that everyone will take advantage of you when you give them the chance. And as such, you cannot give anyone a chance. So you cannot be close. You cannot be dependent. You cannot deeply partner. Oh, you can manipulate and collude and, and various things like that, but it's not as fun as being in a synergistic dance with anyone and anything. It's not as fun. The human brain, the empathic brain, the brain at which we become a human being, as opposed to a human animal, a reptile, is the empathic brain. Now, this brain can love. This brain can feel. This brain can have compassion. This brain can feel full-bodied joy. This brain is an incredibly pleasurable brain. And it is the antithesis of the reptilian brain, because the reptilian brain attacks what is smaller than it to exploit it. That's the crocodile game. If you're smaller than me and can't get away, I will chase you down. I will seduce you. I will steal your money. I'll get an extra cut. I'll get you to do this for me. I'll get you to do that for me. I'll intimidate you. I'll threaten you. And I'll get these things from you because I can, because you're scared of me. I will exploit my fear to extract from you what benefits my survival. And you're expendable. It doesn't matter about you. You are expendable. Because I'm better than you. In the reptilian paradigm, the winner is always the best one. And so it's the might makes right algorithm. If I win the war, then God was on my side. What you're saying is that God is mass, God is power, God is a sociopath. And so, because to be empathic, if you are bigger than someone, you support them. Well, that doesn't feel right, because you're in the reptilian paradigm. The right thing to do for a reptile, if you are bigger, is to attack, corner, extract energy, rape, and take from that which is smaller, so that you can become even bigger and do it some more. So your job is to become bigger, badder, better. Now, this is predominantly played out today in financial circles. Microsoft wiped out this up-and-coming software company, right? Sent them 3 or 4 lawsuits, threatened their customers. They wouldn't supply Windows for free if they continued using that company. Beat their chest a little bit, paid for some bad publicity, did a private detective job, planted some bugs in the software, and the company is no more. And Microsoft is, as it was known in the software industry, the 800-pound gorilla that, from the reptilian point of view, is important because it always wins. It always survives and gets bigger, and it consumes its adversaries. That's all a shareholder in a reptilian paradigm wants. I want to be part of the entity that wins in a feudal reptilian paradigm. I want to wipe the competition out, destroy them. That's my reptile, right? We destroyed the competition. We outsmarted them, we outgunned them, we did this, and we came out smiling. We got more money. We wore them down. All of this is reptilian. And to the reptile, this is the peak of pleasure. The peak of pleasure is to win at all costs, to win. I beat the motherfuckers. Ground them into the dust. That makes me a competent reptile. And that's to win, to go to, now you can do another bout. Now you can joust again. And that's really the loop of the reptile. Prepare, strategize, plan to win, survive the tournament. Be praised by all the other reptiles that want to, because the other thing that goes on in the reptilian paradigm is there's not a sense of idealism and honor within the reptilian paradigm. What there is a sense of I want to be on the side of the winner. And so a politician, another sociopathic arena, is picking running mates and allies, etc., that are going to win. And the business people are trying to pick the winner as well, because we all know that once elected, the spoils of victory will be handed to the victors. So Goldman Sachs gave me $1 million. Let's see what meaningless people can be exploited. Let's give Goldman Sachs preferential treatment. The spoils of war. Goldman Sachs picked the winner. That's me. I won in part because of Goldman Sachs. And so my job now is to take the bounty of power, not for the small people who need it and all that, because that's empathic. But my job is to take the bounty of power and dish it out to the winning team, Goldman Sachs. That's what winning is. Now, does it tie in line with the ideal of a government for the people? But forget all that. That's for children. We're sociopaths here. We're not bullshitting. And we're here for one thing only. We're here to win. And to win at all costs. Destroy someone's life here. Undermine this. Cut up someone's dog because they were going to talk. Hire a private eye to spook this out. We're into winning. We're into winning. Now, the problem, as I say, the pinnacle is winning. The problem in the reptilian brain is that there's always a bigger animal. It never lasts forever. And as soon as the other adversary wins, now they have the power. They have the spoils. And the reptile does understand revenge. So you get nothing. We're going out of our way to give you nothing. Even though it'd be good for the country, even though it's in my own interest. Screw that. What I want is to see you suffer. Makes me happy. Makes me feel good. Like I'm getting validation that I won. Now, if you are in the reptilian brain, this does feel a lot better than watching the other person up there smirk and rub it all in your nose and all that. Absolutely. So this then creates the fuel, the resentment, the anger, the bitterness, the fuel to get back what they took from you. Let's go get them, says the sales team. So salespeople all over the country in a reptilian paradigm. Let's destroy the competition. No, let's do this. They stole this customer from us. We're going to get that thing. We're going to make it a bigger customer. We're going to just ruin that company. Now, this is what it is, but it's not ecstasy. It's not trust. It's not love. It's not sustainable also. Why is it not sustainable? Well, one of the reasons is the phenomena of the pendulum, meaning the more one side abuses power and swings off to this side, the more resentment and suffering is going on. The Taliban is the huge winner in the war in Afghanistan with the U.S. Why? It's the same thing that happened in Vietnam. The U.S. dropped bombs on weddings from a drone. The U.S. blew up apartment complexes of innocent women and children from a drone. Now, imagine for a moment, to us Americans, right? Imagine for a moment that the Taliban, who we're not really that interested in the Taliban, generally speaking, like, fine, they're over there, we're here, we're getting on with our football game and all this. But imagine that the Taliban starts dropping drone bombs on your grandmother's apartment complex. Well, see, suddenly you're very interested in the Taliban. Those bastards, how dare they? I think it would be safe to say that if the Taliban had done to the United States what the United States has done to the Taliban, dropped, let's say, 100,000 bombs over a 20-year period on children, grandmothers, priests, rabbis, native landscapes, and made your life miserable for 20 years, every single one of you in America would be saying, those fucking bastards, here, some money to the militia, some money to the military, some money here. Maybe I'll sign up. Let's send my son to sign up. In other words, when you terrorize an enemy, when you abuse power, you create fear, resentment, hostility, rage, and single-minded purpose. The purpose of your single-minded purpose is to destroy your dominator, your enemy. And so that's exactly what happened. It happened in Iraq. It happened in Vietnam, and it happened in Afghanistan. By giving PTSD and death and torture to an entire population to varying degrees, that population will automatically identify the source of that biologically as the enemy, and they will be fueled to work harder, get smarter, learn about computers. Like, the Taliban weren't all that interested in the internet until they learned that that's what they had to become good at. They had to become good at public relations. So you fuel a rage, a motivation in an abused enemy, in a tormented foe that would never exist if you didn't torment them. Now, the longer you abuse them, the more you train them in discipline, in dedication, the more you reduce them to a human animal. And what's left is Nemesis, the Greek goddess of revenge. You took what I love from me, and I'm going to destroy you. I'm already destroyed. I have nothing left to lose. My only focus is revenge. And this is why in abuse, power, and reptilian cycles, they always pendulum. The more you pendulum to the one side, the more they pendulum to the other side. That's just how it goes. And so if you push someone over here, they'll push back over here. You push them over here. So the winning, it never lasts long, because while you get fat in the luxury of the victor, the spoils of victory, and are not challenged, the underdog is challenged and insulted every single day until they explode upon the scene and take back. Now, life is winning the whole time. Reality is winning by this pain, fear-based competition. It's growing. The Taliban know more English than they did before the war. The Taliban have better computers. The Taliban are more organized. They understand what matters more. They have better prioritization skills. They've got more loyalty. They've got more organized force. Because it was evoked by a larger bully that needed to be, patience was generated. So this is the cycle of energy. And so you go from winning then, and ultimately you become the loser. You also go from winning to losing for another reason, which is that, the American people have been bankrupted by tens of trillions of dollars of debt that could have gone into its infrastructures, could have given free internet at 200 megabytes a second to every American home, could have paid down the national debt, could have planted 1 trillion trees. 1 trillion trees could have been planted. Just take one of those trillions and plant 1 trillion trees across the planet. Now, maybe America would become carbon neutral and still have trillions to spare and have more goodwill and more respect around the rest of the world. But of course, that would be intelligent. That would be a higher form of intelligence. And that's the basis upon which we look down on animals, is they're a lower form of intelligence. The reptile is not very smart. The sociopathic pattern analyzing reptile is much more smart, but they're not wise. That's another level of intelligence. You know, I can shoot off 40 rounds of an AK-47 anytime I want. I can hit every target. I can respond faster than anyone else. And you're a loser. Because you can't love. You can't trust. You've got PTSD, one of the most horrific states that can be induced by human beings. You're a loser in the big game, which is the human brain. Now, the empathic brain, which is the next level of evolution, is the opposite of the reptilian brain. And so the big one takes care of the small one, if you're an empath. The smart one takes care of the less smart one, if you're an empath. The powerful protect the weak. The parents protect the children. If you're an empath, the bigger you are, the more you protect that which is small. And out of this comes trustworthiness. And out of trustworthiness comes trust. And out of trust comes intimacy. And out of intimacy comes understanding. And out of understanding comes empathy. And out of empathy comes attunement. And out of attunement comes more synergy and collaboration. And out of synergy and collaboration comes creativity, abundance, joy. There's a tremendous amount of energy and flow and value that is released as one enters the empathic paradigm. It is 100 times more pleasurable than the sociopathic winning. It is 100 times more pleasurable. And so the sociopath always loses. The reptile, the human animal, is a loser at the big game of enjoyment, of value. But they are a winner at the competitive game, or a loser. They're a winner and a loser, and it'll oscillate back and forth. They're a winner and a loser at the comparative competition, the game of survival and winning against an enemy. And so we're at the nexus in evolution where, to the degree that there is trauma, pain, and suffering present in each one of us, in our countries and in our species, trauma, PTSD, pain, suffering, each feed the reptilian brain. They give it tremendous amount of food. And so, to that extent, we are human animals. And to the extent that we create trustworthiness, abundance, and value, we are humans. We enter the bud, the tight bud of the reptilian brain opens, and the stamens, the vulnerability, the vulva of the empathic brain with all of its sensuality opens. And it is a wondrous opening, a wondrous state. The pleasure is off the chart. But the question is, how warm is the ecology around that open state? How warm is it? Because if it's cold, if the stamens are frostbitten in the coldness of calculated reptilian thinking and action, the crop is lost, the flower withers, and you go back and become a better reptile and become a better sociopath with more fear of the pain of that withering, because there's nothing more excruciating than the pain of a withering, frozen empath who descends into the death, the loss of identity. And so for those of us who have tasted being a human being rather than a reptile, who have tasted our humanity, our empathic brain is the single most valuable resource of our lives. Many people do actually give their lives to defend out of love for their children, out of love for something bigger than themselves. That is a sweet death compared to the death of leaving one's children behind in a fight to survive. My children will slow me down. I got to leave them behind. You have to cut off your humanity to survive in a sociopathic environment. One has to disown the love of one's children, the love of one's ideals, the love of beauty, truth, and goodness. One has to disown in order to survive in a sociopathic environment. And that is the price. And that's why the biggest price is the loss of humanity, which is the loss of empathy for oneself and for another human being. In the reptilian paradigm, the big one consumes and feeds on the small one. In the empathic paradigm, the big one loves and supports and champions the small one, and is born a human being. The small one within and the small one without. An empath honors vulnerability. And so we're in that in-between period. The greatest price that we can pay is the loss of our humanity. And there's a yet higher brain, the transcendent brain. And this is an even greater loss, because to empathize with is to act as if we were one. At the transcendent state of consciousness, the liminal door of ego dissolution, where we remember our inextricable connection with every part of reality at that liminal door, that transcendence, that knowledge that we are one. At that point in our journey, it is the greatest ecstasy, the greatest healing, the greatest bliss imaginable. And to touch that, to taste the divine, the oneness with the garden, the oneness of the sphere, the totality of all that is, to taste that is 1,000 times more satisfying than destroying a company for an extra billion, or running a new race car driver off the track, or bullying the smallest kid in school and winning, surprise, surprise. It's absolutely exquisite. And where we're at is in the rational sociopath moving into the rational empath. It's called enlightened self-interest. As a species, as a cult, we're in that liminal between, should I trust this person and get beaten, or should I exploit this opportunity to get ahead? We're at that point. In a cult that values the winner more than it values the exquisite beauty of empathy and joy. Now, there were and maybe other themes that I want to explore around this, but understanding these 4 brain operating systems and understanding the cost in joy, in well-being, of losing access to one's own transcendent state, of losing access to one's own empathy. This is the greatest tragedy. And what protection does is, like an anesthetic of distance, of dissociation, what protection does is it reduces the pain threshold of exposure to sociopathic programs, protocols, and people to a level where one can afford to enter the empathic brain, the transcendent brain, without dying, without collapsing in grief, without collapsing in uncontrollable sobs. Protection is also about access to transcendent energy and consciousness that shields one. When you are deeply connected to love and kindness inside, and have a little space from the cruelty and fear that is around you, whether it's in the news or at work or around you. You have a little bit more distance from pain and access to healing, access to love and energy. And whether that protection is provided by being able to hold and hug someone, whether that protection is the transcendent state of orgasm, whether that protection is going out in nature and seeing the beauty the truth, the goodness in nature, whether that protection is a form of prayer, of blessing, whether the protection is seeing the kindness of another human being. Each of those things are a balm, a healing, a salve on the empathic and the transcendent brain. And that balm, that salve, can allow us to have more access to our empathic and transcendent brain. Having more access to our transcendent and empathic brain, we can retain the most precious gift that a human being can access, can have, which is a connection with their self, the larger self, the empath, the transcendent one, a connection with self. Anyone who knows that connection would not give it up at any price. A rational reptile would not pay a penny for it. It's incomprehensible to a rational reptile. A rational reptile can destroy 1,000 families, displace a community, cause erosion, clear-cut a forest, and all their focus is on is undercutting the other timber company, extracting a little bit more from the employees to give it to the people who need it the least, the shareholders. An empath can empathize with and even pity a reptile, a rational sociopath. Someone in transcendence can feel the sadness and grief of giving up so much for so little, and understand that it is a part of reality. The rational reptile cannot fathom why someone would give up $1 million of easy profit in order to give birth to this. The rational reptile cannot understand. The irrational reptile isn't even aware that it doesn't understand. But when we look at protection, other than the protection of the body itself, we're looking mostly at shielding from concentrated cruelty that overwhelms the empathic brain with frostbite and causes us to descend into the pure materialism of rational analysis with no meaning and feeling, or the overwhelming and incapacitating grief of not being able to love and not being able to be seen in that love. Hi, I'm Dane Rose. All knowledge begins with a paradigm, and out of that paradigm comes an idea, an awareness that we adopt, reject, or synthesize into something better. It doesn't become wisdom, it doesn't become useful until we take action, until we integrate it into not only our thoughts, but our feelings, our body, our words, and our way of being. For that to occur, we have to move from the passive media paradigm into more active engagement. In the link below, in the More Information section, is an invitation to join a very small, deliberately filtered, high-quality discussion with a group of people who share a common language and want to work with these ideas, with me and with one another, with the sole goal of creating 10 times more sustainable well-being for ourselves and those around us per unit of energy invested. Thank you for watching.